Today we are going to be looking at the great German composer Robert Schumann. He was born in 1810 in Zwickau, which is in Germany. He was the son of a writer and book dealer, and in fact this contributed greatly to his love of literature and poetry, which played a considerable role in his compositions later on. He wrote works that embody musical romanticism. His works are both autobiographical, they definitely embody his life story, and they are programmatic. They have a clear underlying theme. He focuses on an idea, on an emotion, and this becomes the single theme that he focuses on in a particular piece. Now, his works are characterized by their lyrical character. He was a great master of melodic writing. He was also a writer and a critic, and he promoted the works of other composers. He studied law at Leipzig University, but even during this time he devoted much of his energy to literature and music. In his 20s he decided to become a virtuoso pianist, but he actually damaged his right hand. He had a contraption which was designed to stretch his fingers, and he injured one of his fingers. And this was definitely a blow to his performance career, but he decided to focus on composition. Around this time, he started to compose piano works. He was also the editor of the Neue Zeitschrift für Musik, the New Journal of Music, from 1834 to 1844. In this journal, he promoted composers who were actually viewed as revolutionaries at the time, Chopin and Berlioz, and various other composers. While studying the piano, he met his piano teacher's daughter Clara. Clara Wick was her name. And at the time she was a 9-year-old piano prodigy. She used to tour the world, she was quite exceptional. Now they waited until she was 17 years old to get married, but her father objected very strongly to the marriage, and in fact they had to go to court to get permission to proceed with their marriage. However, their marriage was actually a happy one. They had 8 children and they were fairly content. Clara, who was born in 1819, played an important role in interpreting and promoting her husband's compositions. She herself was an important composer in her own right and a respected teacher. And she also influenced the direction which Robert took in his compositional endeavors. She encouraged him later on to turn to symphonies. She promoted his works. They were definitely a partnership in every sense of the word. The beginning of his compositional career, Schumann was involved in piano music. That was one of the interesting features of his career. He would focus on one particular genre for a while and really get it out of his system. Then he would focus on another genre. So in the beginning he focused on piano compositions. And in fact this grew out of his piano improvisations. He had a keen sense of melody and he improvised quite naturally. He would focus again on one particular figuration, maybe a certain rhythm expressed how he felt, or a certain inflection. And this was his early piano career. Now in the 1840s he started to compose art songs. He was actually another prolific composer of art songs, just like Schubert, whom we discussed in the previous lecture. He was in fact the first significant composer of Lieder after Schubert. Now, this grew partially out of his keen interest in poetry, as we mentioned earlier on. Examples of his works of this particular genre, the art song, include his famous Dichterliebe, which translates as poet's love, and Frauenliebe und Leben, woman's love and life. And one can see that he was definitely fixated on the theme of love because his marriage to Clara was imminent at this time. He composed 120 songs during 1840, and he referred to this actually as his Liederjahr. Both his piano and vocal works were arranged in sets or cycles. This was an interesting feature. They were united by a common theme, and in fact in a given piece, as we mentioned, he would use a single figuration throughout to express a single mood. So, for example, there was Kinderszenen, and he focused on scenes from childhood. from childhood, and in each piece he would choose one figuration, say a recurring rhythmic idea, to express the sentiment of that particular piece, but they were united as a set of pieces, as a cycle. He, of course, was using poetry from the great German poets, and the poetic ideas underpinned each of these pieces. In fact, he viewed the poetry as being just as important as the music, and he saw the voice in his art songs as being just as important as the piano. He believed in unifying ideas. Another one of his famous piano cycles was Fantasiestucke. We're going to look at one of the pieces from Fantasiestucke. Fantasiestucke translates as fantasy pieces. Now, just like all other romantic composers, he was clearly fixated on the idea of fantasy, of the otherworldly, of the romantic, and there are clearly extra musical influences on this work with strong autobiographical influences. One can see his life coming into it, his experiences underpinned what he did. There were clearly extra musical influences. Now, after the 1840s, perhaps under the influence of Clara, he began to write symphonies and chamber music. Again, these works were endowed with his unique form of lyricism, and particularly the second theme. Often in a work, the second theme is the more lyrical one, as opposed to the A theme, which might be more outspoken. The B theme serves as a contrasting theme, and Schumann definitely tried to put all of his life's experience, his emotions, into the second lyrical theme. Now, as we mentioned, one of the pieces from Fantasiestucke, which was his Opus 12, composed in 1837, was Aufschwung, which translates as soaring. Fantasiestucke is a set of 8 short piano pieces. The work is indeed symptomatic of his interest in fantastical ideas and fantasy, which was common to all romantic composers. And it is also endowed with much passion. He had a passionate life, a life of challenges, and he was a romantic person. Just like in his art songs, the work is linked to a definite image or idea. He's not just expressing some vague musical sentiment. He has a picture in his mind which he's trying to convey. It has a rapid tempo and sudden changes in mood and sudden changes in musical ideas. The piece could be described as having an A, B, A, C, A, B, A form. So there is definitely an underlying form. The A theme is restless. It has this jarring dotted rhythm which we will listen to shortly. The B theme, as we mentioned earlier, is highly lyrical and flowing. Both a melody and an accompaniment are played by the pianist's right hand. It is quite a challenge to play this piece. The C theme is more relaxed and expansive, and it helps to dissipate some of the tension of the work. Near the end of the C section, there is this crescendo, which actually prepares the way for the return of the A theme. It generates tension, and so it brings back in the A theme. So as we said, this outgoing work was definitely an expression of Schumann's innate nature as a person, his character. Now, unfortunately, this pent-up passion, who he was as a person, led to a lot of tragedy later on. Towards the end of his life, Schumann suffered both from physical and mental health. He actually tried in 1854 to drown himself and was committed to an asylum where he died 2 years later. It was a tragic life, but a passionate life. Now, to conclude, Schumann was the first important successor to Schubert as a composer of Lieder. Of course, he was also renowned for his piano music, his symphonies, and his chamber music. And as we mentioned, he would focus on each of these genres in turn. He would spend the first 10 years on piano music, the next 10 years or 1 year on symphonies, depending. There was no fixed time, but he had fixed periods in his life. Now, like Schubert, he believed the piano should be just as important as the voice, and we see this in the art songs of both composers. He thus gave the piano long preludes, interludes, and postludes throughout an art song cycle to show that it was definitely an important partner in the expression of this work. He wanted to show it didn't just serve to accompany the voice. Now, his life had its disappointments, its ups and downs, without a doubt. I mean, he lived for about 40-something years, but his contribution to music, both as a composer and as a critic, and as a poet, as it were, was significant. He was an important figure at that stage in the Romantic period. He did a lot for music, he promoted music, he paved the way for the development we see later on in composers from later on in the 19th century. He was at a critical point at that juncture. So he played a significant role in so many different ways. What he did for music was significant. We're going to listen now to Aufschwung and to listen to the various sections. Here you can hear the A theme with its restless dotted rhythm. Here you can hear the B theme, which is highly lyrical and flowing. Here you can hear the C theme, which is more expansive and relaxed and helps to dissipate some of the music's tension. Here you can hear the growing crescendo at the end of the C theme, which helps to generate the tension necessary to bring back the A theme.